of Cosmogonic Eros, Chapter 2, on the Eros concept of Antiquity. Two thoughts spring equally to mind when we talk in general of the Eros of Antiquity. The image of winged ephebes with bows, quivers, arrows, garland and torch. And then there is the idea of Platonic Eros, Platonic love. The image of amiably trifling erotes first finds its apotheosis in the Alexandrian period and belongs to the Rococo period of antiquity. Platonic Eros certainly connects to something deeper, but intentionally distorts it, as we will show. Eros is a small boy punished with a rod by his mother Aphrodite for his bad behaviour. As a Pato is a creation of the pastoral poets. In Theocritus's Adonia Zeusai, Aphrodite and Adonis are reclined, and over them a throng of erots floats, like youths in their perfect prime, and like the nightingale's brood, ensconced in the shady tree, flitting from branch to branch, testing their wings in youthful exuberance. This image, or the even more opulent Amor, whose passionate yet fateful love for Psyche was regaled in Apuleius's charming tale, has displaced the primal and original figure of the god in the consciousness of the late period, so much so that even intelligentsia today are not always able to follow when we speak of cosmogonic Eros. We hear a considerably different tune if we listen to the choir of Sophocles' Antigone, as rendered by Jordan. All-conquering Eros, you chose your place of ambush, from where to spring on certain prey, to be the rosy cheeks of a virgin. You stride over the sea, over fields and meadows. No one can escape you, neither eternal God nor mortal man. To know you is rapture. You tempt even the heart of the righteous to commit iniquity. Even now you inflamed discord between father and son, for against the mighty voice of that primal command rises up love's demand. Our attention is piqued even more with the notionally exaggerated verses of the tragedy in Sophocles, and we begin to suspect the daemonic nature of primal Eros when Anacreon, who is usually so gracefully jocose on the subject, announces, Eros beats him with a hefty hammer and then plunges him into the mountain stream like the smith tempers glowing steel. Yet this verse by serious-minded Ibycus, very freely transcribed, touches us altogether as if wrapped in the winged tremorous thrill of youth. Cyprus's Thracian north storm rages as if whipped by lightning and chased by scorching coals. Thus faltering senses, an irresistible force rules me since I awoke with Eros in my heart. We believe that a great distance lies between this and the verses of Theocritus above. Meanwhile, the concept of Eros has changed completely in the mind of philosophers as in step with a time that is developing to be ever more human and circumscribed. The threatening and also auspicious figure of a daemon of elemental powers of nature is gradually hidden behind far-off clouds, before ultimately falling into oblivion. 3.5 centuries passed between the days of Ibycus and Theocritus. There is therefore no doubt that the further back in time we go, the more this image is manifested in poetry, along with its superhuman aspects. The fact that Eros does not appear at all in the mythology of the much older Homer does not prevent us from asserting that the driving forces that form the basis of his existence are older than even Homer himself. There is now no longer any doubt that the intellectual and personal deific forces triumphed over the chthonic and elemental deific forces, considerably earlier amongst the Ionian Greeks of the Anatolian coastland than amongst the Greeks of the mainland. Homer is unlikely to show us any especially revealing evidence of primal times. Instead, we must look partly to Hesiod, partly to the remains of sects and secret societies that arose in the 8th to 6th centuries from the struggle between all layers of the Greek soul with the Dionysian deluge. Now in Hesiod, as little as he deals with Eros, we do not exactly find a cosmogonic Eros in the narrowest sense. Instead we meet Eros who, as the, quote, most beautiful of all deathless gods, together with Gaia and the prepolar chaos, which prefigures both, forms the primal creative trinity of all existence. Eros is ultimately recognized as entirely cosmogonic by the mythical doctrines of the Orphics, in which the exceptionally significant figure, Kronos, never-aging time, forms the silver cosmic egg from ether and the immeasurable abyss. From this issued forth the lustrous god, Phanes Eros Dionysus, also known as Metis and Erechopaios, a hermaphrodite, carrying within him herself the seeds of all the gods. Through auto-copulation, as we might say, he creates the oldest of the 3 Greek lineages of gods, Echidna, Gaia, and Uranos. Similarly, the Zeus of Pherecydes only became a demiurge once he had turned himself into Eros. Lucian speaks of the demiurge Eros as the Hierophant of the mists, who threw chaos into the depths and pierced the formative night with a radiant lamp. However, as much as the Orphics subsequently derailed into a redemption doctrine, the ruins of which, as it were, fertilized the ground on which the Pythagorean school and subsequently Platonism would rest, the fact that the Orphics nevertheless connected with primal cults can no longer be disputed based on the evidence that we have on this according to the latest research findings. Our image of the winged Erots will be further undermined when we learn that the primal Eros of the Boeotian Thespiae, which inhabitants celebrated their Erotidia festival every 5 years in honour of Eros, was a massive unwrought stone, similar to the aerolith of the Great Mother, Cybele, or, in order to bridge the swathes of time, similar to the conical stone of Emesa, with which the madness of Caesar Elagabalus, priest of the god of the same name, mocked the Olympian gods of Rome. Far less, though, than it may appear at first, there also lay in the temple of Jupiter Feretrius a holy flintstone against which one swore oaths and made solemn contracts. Likewise, we have accounts of temples and festivals to the same Eros from the Laconian Leuctra, as well as from Parion and Troad. In this instance, taking us back to Pelasgian prehistory. An ancient cult of the beautiful Demeter at Phyla clearly represents the transition to the Orphic Bacchic rites, where, alongside Zeus Ktesios, Eros Cosmogonos rules as the god of mysteries and redeemer. The Orphic hymns of Lycomedes rang out to honour him, hymns known to Pausanias, who said that the Homeric hymns may indeed be more beautiful due to an embellishment of words, but that the Orphic hymns surpassed them in piety. Likewise, this daemon of planetary pregnancy and eternal rebirth differs to no less degree from the Alexandrian Eros of fleeting passions, nor does the later Eros of male love differ any less from the earlier image that we generally connect with the predominantly Platonic concept of Hellenic pederasty. There must have been something profoundly austere, yes, even formidable, about a god that bound the sacred band of Thebes in fealty to each other, even if it led to a hero's death for their homeland, or stirred the Cretans to send their most beautiful youths for slaughter as sacrifices to Eros. And indeed it was not due to a feminine trait that his cult lasted the longest, relatively speaking, in hard and ancient Sparta. Based on all this, we feel justified in placing Primal Eros alongside the great mystery gods such as Sabazius, Attis, Adonis, Dionysus, Bacchus, Osiris, Serapis, etc., which in turn form the manifold retinue of the great mothers, Cybele, Astarte, Aphrodite, Ma, Anaitis, Berecynthia, Isis, Demeter, Hecate, Persephone, Urania, Luna, Magna Mater, Venus Soelestis, Anna Peneris, Perinus, Bellona, etc. But whereas the latter ascended to ever greater heights in the amalgam of gods in the Roman Empire, the cult of Eros dwindled, leaving two things from the former daemon's primal rights: the human Eros, popularly glorified in art and of whom the lyricists playfully sang, and Eros as a philosophically partial notion for the catharsis of secret associations. A catharsis which had degenerated into escapism and a doctrine of renunciation, whose later cult circled primarily around figures such as Baal, Serapis, Zagreus, Mithras, and Sol Invictus. We will come to explain why Cosmogonic Eros in particular should supposedly meet such a fate. But first we must dedicate a few words to the doctrines of that man who decisively determines the philosophical concept of Eros in Antiquity, the ideas of Plato. Although Plato's entire philosophy is more or less permeated by the concept of Eros, the two really erotic dialogues are Symposium and Phaedrus. Since we assume the contents of the Symposium are known, it suffices for us to cite a few parts, following the translation by Schleiermacher, which we will build on later, partly in agreement and partly in disagreement. While explaining the irresistible call of love between the two halves of those sexually duplicated, round, primal beings striving ever one to the other, whom the gods cut into two pieces so they would not become too powerful, it is said of those lovers that, in response to Hephaestus' question as to whether he should weld them together into one being, they would have thought to hear the very thing that they inwardly longed for, namely, to turn two into one through closeness and melting with the beloved. The only aspect to be remembered from the later characterization of Eros by Platonist Socrates, which is famously revealed by a woman, Diotima, is the intrinsic phrase according to which Eros is neither a god nor a human, but a daemon partaking of both existences. This was due to him originating from his godly father Porus, resourcefulness or abundance, and the ungodly mother Penia, lack or scantiness, whereby it is said that he possesses just enough perfection to have to strive to ever greater perfection. In such a sense he stands as mediator between the gods and mankind, and through this daemonic essence proceeds also all prophecy and the priestly art in regard to sacrifices, consecrations and conjurations, and magic. For a god does not keep company with humans. Instead, all contact and conversation of the gods with humanity occurs through this daemonic essence, both waking and sleeping. The one who is skilled at this is a daemonic man, but the one who is skilled only at other things, he is a common man. And so the state of erotic arousal, which we have expressed in the aforementioned quote to a much broader degree than would be the standard in today's language, is founded on a unique neediness, which drives the needy person to the object of his need as to an augmenting pole, so that only through the supplementary addition of this pole does he achieve plenitude and completeness. Quote, quoting Diotima, "Now if this is the nature of love, then what is the form of their pursuit? Whose actions and doings one could actually call love?" And as Socrates was unable to answer, she responds, "I will tell you. It is a birth in beauty, both of body and soul. All people are namely pregnant, and when they reach a certain age, our nature strives to procreate. And they cannot procreate in ugliness, but only in beauty. Beauty, therefore, a goddess who conjoins and acts as midwife in this parturition." End quote. Furthermore, the procreative lust of the body is differentiated from the procreative lust of the soul. The former is found in animals and in the animal part of man. The latter is only found in the soul aspect of mankind. This latter is the source of works by artists and poets, as well as by deeds of heroes to ensure eternal glory in the memory of the afterworld, as well as of authentic love affairs, by which we mean between man and youth, for begetting the highest wisdom in the soul of the beloved and for sharing in the reclamation of heavenly bliss. The way by which such a lover ultimately attains the goal of Eros, namely the teleitai, is best explained with an oblique look at Plato's theory of forms using the more helpful Phaedrus. Plato's argument is this: if someone loves a beautiful or excellent person, he does not love the ephemeral individual, who is certainly characterized by some flaws. Instead, he loves the beauty, excellence, goodness, righteousness, and whatever other virtues appear to be lovable and arousing affection that he finds about and in him, or more precisely, which are prompted by him. The individual is never the beauty, goodness, and excellence. In fact, he depicts these virtues only in a similar vein to others. Many individuals share in one and the same beauty, goodness, and excellence, and their partaking in the transpersonal, imperishable, and flawless ideas of beauty, excellence, and goodness makes them worthy of love. But how do we even know about such ideas when each perceptual individual is never the idea as any one idea? How can we know of something which in and of itself cannot in any way be glimpsed? The Platonic answer is from memory, anamnesis. In a pre-birth, better, higher existence, when our soul, or rather its immortal part, had not yet mixed with corporeality, we were capable of beholding, unshown, these ideas or primal images. Then, however, obviously as a consequence of some kind of metaphysical fall, the immortal soul sank into the corporeal and subsequently forgot its entire pre-birth state, and thus also the previously beheld ideas. Herein exists Eros, that in the moment of beholding certain persons who are gifted with more than the usual share in those ideas, the memory of that which was previously seen is ignited within us, and we, discovering the sensuously invisible beauty, goodness, and excellence in their ephemeral after-image, are in turn overcome by love for that image. Quote, "For man must comprehend, according to categories, anything manifest that issues as one thing from many sensual perceptions synthesized by reason. However, this is simply a memory of that which was once beheld by our soul when it walked in the footsteps of a god, and its vision was raised above that which we now perceive as reality, and it emerged as a true being. But now beauty alone has taken this part of fate to be the most conspicuous and most enchanting. The initiate who has already seen much of the air will initially shiver when he espies a godly visage that excellently emulates beauty. Yet subsequently he will perceive a holy awe, as if before a god, and if he were not to fear falling into an all too intense madness, then he would sacrifice to the most favoured youth as if to the image of a god." End quote. This is followed by a battle between the bad and the good steeds of the soul, or between earthly and heavenly love as devised by Plato, depicted as Aphrodite Pandemos and Urania in the Symposium, or ultimately, without euphemism, between sensual inclination and an abstract enthusiasm of the soul. To the degree that heavenly love prevails over earthly love, the craving for love dissipates, and in its place arises the desire to develop the spiritual substance of the beloved to the highest level, and to make him thus like the god with which the sudden memory of Eros reveals is, as it were, germinating within him. And indeed every lover, depending on the affinity of similarity, creates the beloved in accordance with the god that dominates him. Those led by Zeus seek to know if his soul is Zeus-like, and he is destined to be a philosopher and high-ranking leader. Those in the retinue of Hera search for a soul suitable for royal dominion, and so on. Quote, "And since they then view the beloved as the origin of this, they are even more satisfied with him. Like Bacchantes, they effuse over the soul of the beloved, and thus make him as similar to their god as possible." End quote. However, through this manner of love, the plumage of the soul, which it had lost during the fall from the zone of primal images into the world of ephemeral likenesses, gradually returns. At this point, love already approaches the boundary where, instead of the ever-mutable, that which never conducts itself in the same way, it is capable of seeing that colourless and amorphous and immaterial essence which exists in truth. After their death, the lovers reach an apotheosis at the place beyond heaven that no poet has ever done justice to extol. For they have become feathered in light and have achieved victory in one of the three truly Olympic battles, and neither temperance nor godly frenzy can create any greater good for man than this. We have here the philosophical seed of the tale of Amor and Psyche, and see the greatest concern of the ancient soul, that is Eros, placed into the service of escapist metaphysics with the finest woven arts of seduction of a semi-poetic dialectic. A metaphysics which disguises its nature of anti-sensuality with the pretense of otherworldly bliss, and which glosses over the actual goal, which is hatred and war against the passions. We will speak further on the meaning of these so-called ideas, but for now we will reveal the life-negating goal of this thinking only in regard to the experience of love, using a consideration that is as obvious as it is easy to understand. For we ask, is it then true that when a person loves another, he loves the beauty, goodness, and excellence in him? Everyone knows that it is precisely a powerful and deep love that looks least for the reasons for its existence. Everyone who knows that the lover may indeed recognize certain faults or weaknesses in his beloved, and yet still not wish to eliminate those faults, but instead he loves his beloved with those weaknesses, and would in a state of alarm wish those accustomed flaws back should they suddenly disappear from the beloved's image. Quoting Vittoria a Corombona by Tieck, "The fact that you initially horrified me belongs as a dark image to the poem of my love and my life." End quote. Nevertheless, it still remains possible that the goodness, beauty, and excellence that has been experienced may actually be the secret source of love. Alone by dint of every virtue, and equally any flaw that we could name, the beloved without doubt is the same as every other being who can be supposed to have the same virtues or the same flaws. However, is there any person who, as a result of serious introspection, would admit that he loved a person because those virtues were shared by other people? Or will he not rather note that this person, as their beloved, was different from all other conceivable things? let us bring to mind one of the greatest passions ever told by history and legend. For Kriemhild there is only one Siegfried. For Tristan there is only one Isolde. For Ophelia only one Hamlet. For Eloise only one Abelard. For Dante only one Beatrice. For Juliet only one Romeo. For Hölderlin only one Diotima. Should this one perish or be torn away from him in some other way, then everything would perish for the lover, and everything would be torn away from him. The thought of all the many other women and men of equal excellence can in no way replace the one woman or one man for the lover who has lost his beloved, and who is bound in love to him, as irrational as it may be. As highlighted above, Antiquity admittedly does not know of any eternal passions, but only those of a limited duration. However, even an eternal passion can be extinguished, allowing for a second or third person to stand in the beam of light that is Eros. But the one who in that very moment stands in the light of Eros is thus incomparably transported away from the entire remaining world. This applies as equally for love in antiquity and ardour in the Middle Ages. And this is the reason why every comparison fails. Not because the lover wrongly believes that their beloved is more splendid than any other being, but because the beloved is precisely this, and there is no other. Eloise writes to Abelard, "I have sought nothing in you ever except yourself, just you, while not coveting that which is yours." There again, whoever supposes that a person becomes lovable to another due to the beloved's general beauty and excellence is a liar, because by saying this it creates a subterfuge by overlaying the intellectual process of discernment onto the living state of Eros. But it is obvious what secret purpose this subterfuge can in itself result in. By embellishing an aspect of intellect with the word Eros, and thereby permitting only the kind of Eros that relishes certain virtues as its focal point, this sublimates and destroys true Eros. Similarly, the Christian adage regarding love has only served to foist the egalitarian demand for a general regard, so-called love, as they say, of our neighbour, or better yet, blackguard, onto the idea of genuine love, which is selective and deifies. In the same way, Platonic Eros, cf. Nietzsche's pre-existent form of Christianity, tries to foist an affliction of reason onto the soul's arousal of this erotic condition, which would mean that we would actually have to love spectral concepts based on such methodical thinking. We hardly need to add that this demonstrates the sheer apparitional quality of this particular vision, within which this Eros is purportedly to manifest itself.